You ever known anyone who reads a novel, but they just can't wait till they get to the end? And so they read the last 2 pages because they're just afraid that if it goes south, I want to know now and get rid of the stupid book. And so they'll just, they get married. Oh, good. I can read it with, people don't like that. Well, Ecclesiastes is one of these things that was read every single year at the fall harvest. You may feel like this is kind of a book that's negative, but actually it's a book that was used to celebrate all of the crops coming in at the end of the year, the final crops. Not your barley, not your wheat, but your pomegranates and your olives and your grapes and all those. And there was this understanding that how do we do this? How do we take all this in and view it? Because we're going to be back here next year. We're going to be back here next year. There's going to be a lot of work from this harvest to next harvest. And so there's nothing new under the sun. We'll be back here and we will just be a little older, a little more tired. And so how do we view these wonderful days of harvest so that we have a right view of living life? So it's a book that challenges us to find meaning in the right places. It's a book that challenges us to understand that the way the world is because of sin. This is not the natural. This is the fallen world. And all the good things that God gives you should be celebrated. But He's giving you all these good things in a fallen world. In a fallen world. This is not heaven. This is not utopia. This is a world and a life that you live because man rebelled. So that we don't make it something that it's not, but we can find joy in what it is and meaning. And so we're going to go to the end of the book, because otherwise, when you have a message like this for 6 months, it would get quite tiresome. Because is there any answer? It's like, I'll get back to you. I'll give you the answer 6 months from now. I'm going to give it to you right up front. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack again and again why that is the answer. Why is that the answer? In chapter 12, it says, not only was the teacher wise, who I believe is Solomon, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He was wise in his own decisions, but he took his wisdom and he wrote much of it down. A lot of Proverbs, for example. And he pondered and searched out and set out the order of many proverbs, little sayings. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. And we have a certain portion of his Proverbs. The words of the wise are like goads. They're collected sayings like firmly embedded nails, given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Right off the bat, he's saying, there's a wisdom that's worth knowing. There's knowledge worth knowing, but don't add to wisdom. Don't go beyond what is wise. Don't become extreme. Don't look for meaning where it doesn't exist. Don't try and answer questions that cannot be answered. You live in a fallen world. Get answers for a fallen world. Get wisdom for a fallen world. Of making many books, there's no end. And boy, do I know that. Our library buys 20,000 or more books every single year. $20,000 worth of books every single year between our two campuses. And every one of them is brand new. Brand new. That's a lot of books being written about God, about following God, about sin, about faith, about the church. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. After he's gone through 12 chapters. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind, of every man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. We are in a fallen world. God knows that, and he takes note of it, and he takes record of it. Just yesterday, 2 massive killings. Sad. In the one case, racism seems to be part of the problem. In the other case, they don't know yet. But in both cases, there's just an incredible narcissism. I want to make a difference in the most bizarre way. I want to be known. I want to be remembered. Because they realize that, oh, Adam, what were you thinking? And it's like, yeah. We don't know what he was thinking. But what he came up with was not a great thing. And so when you read the book of Song of Songs, or you read the book of Ecclesiastes, this may surprise you, but the key to understanding the books is you must understand Genesis chapter 2 and 3. It's the key. It's the key. You see, in Genesis chapter 2, God gave them all these pleasurable trees to enjoy with full pleasure. And they were naked and they felt no shame, but they wanted more. God gave them the knowledge of what he wanted them to do, but they wanted more wisdom. They wanted more knowledge. God gave them prosperity and success. Said, you'll multiply, bless them. But they wanted more independence, more self-determination, more success. More about them, less about God. In the garden, God told the man only one thing not to do. One thing not to do. He told him several things to do, but only one thing not to do. And he did it. Don't eat the fruit. God also told the man why not to eat the fruit, because on the day you eat it, surely you'll die, which is a faith statement. Do you believe that, Adam? Because if you believe that, you won't eat it. And so the two things that would have kept mankind going in the right direction was obedience and, what's the other one? Faith. And the book of Ecclesiastes ends its answer and says, what is man's duty? It is to fear God and obey his commandments. Now the word fear, if you follow it in the Psalms and other places, Fear is always related to this. Whom do you trust? So when God calls you to fear him, he means put your trust in me and not the false gods. Fear is almost always in the context of faith in the Old Testament. When God calls you to fear him, he is calling you to trust him. Trust him. Don't fear other things. Fear me and obey me. Adam didn't fear God because he did not trust God. And when you do not trust God, you are likely to disobey him. Because he wanted wisdom, independence, and a whole bunch of other things. And the book of Ecclesiastes is going to point out that mankind can have everything. But if in the end it doesn't have a genuine faith in God, a healthy respect and fear for God, enough to trust his words are true, and if a person does not have obedience to God, God says, you will find life in the end, either on this side or on the other side, meaningless. But most of you will find it meaningless long before you're dead. Long before you're dead. Because what gives real joy and meaning in life is to fear the right person, says God. Fear me, respect me, trust me. I can make you happy in your poverty. I can give you joy with your wife with vegetables around a table and make a man with a roast beef dinner miserable. So fear me. The food you have is a gift. But it's also a gift that you have the ability to enjoy them. I give both. So fear God. Because you might have everything but joy and satisfaction and love. Obey me. Because God is taking note of those who truly fear him. And he will call them all to account. Now we know that the Hebrew people understood that if they came to God and asked for forgiveness, they would be forgiven. That's understood. Nevertheless, there are things you can do that you can't undo. And Adam did one of them. He could not undo that his children would be born in sin. He could not undo that his boys would be born in such a way that jealousy could reign in their lives and one could become a murderer. He could not undo the ground would not give of its full strength. He could not undo the fact that he could not go eat of the fruit of the knowledge, a fruit of life. He could not undo the fact that he couldn't get back in the garden. And therefore, this idea of forgiveness should be countered with disobedience is not just a matter of disobey, get forgiven, no consequences. Often disobedience has lasting implications. With this in mind, they're at a feast and they're celebrating it. But the teacher knows that he wants Israel for generations to come to have a right perspective of all the good things God gives them. So they don't make it into something that it isn't. And they don't mock what it is. It is God's goodness. The words of the teacher, chapter 1, the son of David, king of Jerusalem, says, meaningless, meaningless. And the word meaningless comes to the concept of it's temporary. It's here, it's gone, says the teacher. It's somewhat a play on the concept that Abel was here and was gone quickly, and his Hebrew name means temporal. Not here long, as his brother killed him. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. With the concept of understood to be, if you just try and observe things, where do you find meaning? What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? That's a good question to ask. Now, some people would say, well, you get to eat, you don't starve. My grandson, he's just great, you know. He's 5 years old, he's theologically very sharp. And he's talking to the neighbor, and they're peppering the neighbor with questions, and then finally the neighbor says, so where's your daddy? Oh, daddy's working so he can buy food so we don't die. It's a great statement, right? I mean, there's some truth in it, but it's like, well, yeah, that sounds, and the neighbor's like, it's a little, extreme. But it's like, yeah, daddy's working so he makes food so we don't die. So it's pretty clear that there is some value in working so that we don't die. Even a 5-year-old can figure that out. It's like, I mean, he'd be here playing Legos, but we would die. Okay? He has not yet clearly understood the meaninglessness of life. But if you've worked 50 years and you've gone to work and you've gone to work and you've done things and you've gone to work to pay for this, to pay for that, to go to work, to come back, you might enjoy work. But there can be a meaninglessness to it. My boy was extremely loyal to the company. And he still is loyal to them. He was so loyal that even though he was not number one driver, the company made him, or asked him, to train all the new drivers. Because they knew he wouldn't badmouth the company. Because the worst thing you can do is have a new truck driver stay with someone for a whole week and all they can say is bad things about the company. You just sour the guy before he even gets going. And they knew Joshua does not do that. And he's also honest. So he will not teach anyone to cut corners. And so they put him in that position. And he was training guys after guys after guys after guys. It was great. But when all of a sudden he got 4 weeks holidays, and they didn't want men with 4 weeks holidays. They came to him and they just said flat out to him, Joshua, you don't need to work here anymore. Don't feel like you're needed anymore. We don't need you. It was very hurtful. He had been loyal. He had trained many of their truck drivers. But now he wasn't needed. Because everything is, help me out guys, meaningless under the sun. So son, if you were trying to find your meaning in pleasing a company, it just went down the tube. But if your goal was to fear God and obey His commandments, that can't be taken from you. Amen? So why do you do it? If God would have said, oh, by the way, they want to get rid of you, would you do it? Well, now He's no fool. Because now He knows how they feel. So will He stay loyal? Yes. Yes. Because that's obeying God. Because he fears God. And God's called him to be loyal. Because God will take note of everything He's done under the sun, both good and bad. And He'll call it to count one day. Even if there's no one above Him who would like to bring it up. Because it's embarrassing for them. Some people are so wore out by the time they finish work that they realize, wow. Whew. Others, they have the physicality right to the end. My dad was as tough as nails at 65. I could not believe how tough he was. He could be up there in the bush carrying a huge saw, and he could cut down 300-400 trees in a day. That's all I could do as a young man to keep up to him. But then when he was 95, he couldn't stand tall and he couldn't step without a thing. It was the most frustrating thing in his life when he couldn't get out of bed. And all of a sudden, everything starts to feel meaningless. Meaningless. What do people gain unto all their labors of which they toil under the sun? Generations come, generations go, but the earth remains forever. You don't change the planet. There's some people who believe today we're going to save this planet because it's like a little sick baby. It's got a fever, and we're going to reach out, and we're going to touch and heal it. We should be ecologically reasonable and care for the planet God's given us, but it is a fallen planet of which God says one day He's going to melt and refashion it with fire. So keep it in perspective, because man's role is to fear Him and obey Him, and He's willing to melt the planet to make them do that. He's already flooded it once to make man take stock. And so we make a difference. But generations come, generations go, but the earth, it stays the same. The sun rises, the sun sets, and hurries back where it rises. The wind blows to the south, turns to the north, round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full to the place the streams come from. There they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, and the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, here's something new? Look, something new. When you get down to it, most of the stuff that's new really ain't that new. Cell phones are new, correct? But in Africa, when they have no money, they pretend they're on the phone. And they walk around talking to people, but they have no money, they have no plan. There's no one on the other end. But God forbid that anyone would know they're so poor that they can't afford a telephone plan. So there's tens of thousands of Africans who walk around pretending they're talking to people because nothing is new under the sun. No one likes being poor. And no one likes being perceived as poor. It's nothing new. Nothing new under the sun. Yeah, telephones may change, but how they operate, the function they have, the roles they have in a sinful world is the same. At one time it was, what kind of quality buggy did you have? Other times in history it's, how many servants did you have? How noble was the woman that you married? You got some blue blood there? If you go on Facebook, a lot of people, they go on Facebook and they tell the whole world that their husband's the best man in the entire world. They're so blessed because they have the greatest husband in the entire world. My wife does it all the time. I just get tired of it. I'm like, oh, you're just making me embarrassed. Most of these people who do this are 30 years old and younger. They haven't lived long enough to even know what's up and down. But that's not new under the sun. People find their identity and their meaning and their worth based on someone they know, or someone that knows them, or something they have that someone else doesn't have. And many young Christians get involved in this. Quite a few of our young couples from our college get into this. And sometimes I really chastise them. Your awesome husband, you don't even have the power to add one day to his life. Not one day. you're bragging about things that are here but could be gone. Your child, who's just so awesome. I just talked to a man who's broken because his family was his pride and joy. And right now he's got a daughter who won't talk to his wife. Period. And he's brokenhearted. Nothing new really under the sun. What has happened before is done again. I saw on the news there was this family and they got married in the water. She had her dress and everything, and the whole ceremony was in the water. So everyone had to, at the wedding, had to put on like snorkel equipment and everything, and everyone had to get down there. If you're hydrophobic, you're just so enjoying this. I don't know. It's like, could you just imagine if all of a sudden some stingrays or sharks or eels came in to enjoy the wedding? What that would be like? Because they're trying to find somehow, in a really bizarre way, to find something that's new. This hasn't been done before. It's like, well, there's reasons why this has not been done before. Think about it. Most stuff that's never been done before is because it doesn't make any sense. And we got 6,000 years of history to know you're better off getting married on ground than in the bottom of a lake. One was in a swimming pool, so I guess there'd be no sharks there. Is there anything of which one can say, look, something new? It was here long ago, way before our time. No one remembers the former generations. Give me 10 people who lived in Swift Current 100 years ago who were just awesome people, who cared for people, have a great reputation. I couldn't tell you one. And no one will remember us 100 years from now. But God will. So fear God and obey His commandments. God will. God will. And you can find joy in it. God sees all things, knows all things, remembers all things. I'm going to be out in this field getting my barley ready again for next year. And it's grunt work in this time of history of mankind. But He knows if I'm serving Him in these fields that He cursed because of our disobedience. He cursed because of our disobedience. And I'm going to find joy in it. I'm going to ask God to give me joy in doing it, as long as I have breath. I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my mind to study and explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. And he had the time to do it, and he had the resources, and God gave him the mind to do it. But he came to this conclusion that when he studied everything, he said, what a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. Now that sounds like whining, but he's not whining. He's saying, this is truly a fallen world. And when Adam and Eve sinned, God did bring judgment on the world. Oh, Adam, Adam, what were you thinking? I've seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I was in India. You want to make a difference in India? And I share this story with you. Racism, caste system, all this. And it's in the church. It's not just in the world. And I want to make a difference. So I wanted to take the whole staff out for a meal. And they chose not to invite the cooks, because the cooks would feel ashamed to show up with the rest of the staff, even though the head cook had been there longer than every other staff member at the college. And he would feel too much shame even to ask to be invited. I assumed he would be invited, and they were not invited the first time. I was very angry. And I had to talk to them. And next time I said, unless you bring the cooks, No one eats. No one eats. And for the cook, it was 1/2 of 1 month's wage for me to take him out to dinner and his wife. Between him and his wife, it was 1/2 a month's wage, that one meal. And so it was a real honor for him to be able to go. It was like once every 2-3 years you get to do that. Spend 1/2 a month's wage on a meal. You ever done that? Spend 1/2 a month's wage on a meal? No. No. But you know, as I was thinking about this, it made a difference in a small way. And over time, I found that the great supporters of the cooks were the teachers. And they put the cooks ahead of themselves on several occasions. They had super learned this. Most of the time, my experience has been that what's broken cannot be fixed. That sounds so sad, but that's been my experience. People that are hateful, unless God does a work in their heart, they are broken, and often they do not change their ways. Men that hit women, they don't stop, with few exceptions. What is broken cannot be fixed. That is my experience. If I could snap my fingers, I'd get rid of the caste system in India. But what he's saying here, there's so much in life that it's broken. And even if you're a Solomon, and you have all knowledge and all wisdom and all resources and all power, you do not have the ability to change people's hearts. Only God. You cannot help a person enjoy a meal with his. You cannot help a man forgive someone who's done them wrong. Only God can do those things. So we fear God, and we love God, and we obey God, and we find meaning that God's the one in control. He says this as he concludes. He says, "And I said to myself, look, I've increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I've experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom, and meaning that the usefulness of wisdom. Now that I know all this, how useful is it? What has it done for me? Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom. And he certainly had great wisdom in many areas, and also of madness and folly. Maybe we should just be ridiculous. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. It was very cool when I was a young boy to know nothing. Grade 8 to 10 to 12. So what's up? Nothing. What do you plan on doing today? Don't know. Come home to parents. So, Arnie, what'd you learn at school? Nothing. So what are you thinking of doing? Don't know. Only a geek knew anything. Only a geek had a relationship with his parents where you were more than willing to be informed with them. Knowing nothing, caring about nothing, learning nothing. Now that is wisdom. And then the thought was, because we are all individuals, and we keep our thoughts to ourselves, it wouldn't matter anyways. And we're all individuals. We all have our own thoughts. You go to an average high school, when I went to school, every single person had Levi jeans on. No exceptions, except the very, very poor. Because we are all very different. Don't celebrate being ignorant. But don't celebrate being informed. If you celebrate being ignorant, you can be on the verge of apathetic. If you celebrate being informed, you can become a busybody. You need to know everything about everyone. And that's not very attractive either. But this is what he says. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. There's days I've heard from my boys knowledge that I didn't want. and it caused me grief, sadness. We will deal with it, but that is sad. That is sad. You see, Adam and Eve wanted wisdom and knowledge, did they not? But in the end, what did they get? Sadness and grief. God wants us to know him, and God wants us to learn. We were made to learn things. But God says, being informed and wise and articulate and intelligent without the fear of God, that's a chasing after the wind. Because no one's going to remember you. But being a fool and uninformed, that too creates so much heartache. Joy comes from knowing that God delights in his people. Joy comes from knowing that God will remember all the things that we've done. Joy is knowing that he will forgive the things that we've done that are not right. Amen? He will never leave us, never forsake us. So whether in the future you're rich or poor, know that God will never forget you. When Sharon's dad forgot who I was, and he forgot who he was, and he forgot who Mom was, it felt like life was meaningless. But then I remembered in my heart that God never forgot. Who he is. In your life, find meaning in knowing that you trust the Lord and you have a heart to obey him. Amen.